Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the MABE podcast. Hello. Today's guest is the esteemed Carol Salva, Dr. Carol Salva, consultant extraordinaire, author of the wonderful book Boosting Achievement, which just came out in the second edition, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Hi, Carol. How are you doing today?
Oh, Andrew, I'm so happy to be here. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So just to get started, I've seen you present several times, so I'll give you some important information that I know, and if you want to add to it or correct any of it, um, we'll have at it. So it seemed to you like the pivotal moment was you were in suburban Houston, and there was a newcomer class, and in this class, it was new for newcomer multilingual learners, a lot of students with limited or interrupted formal education, and just kind of became like pandemonium. And they were not able to find a teacher for the group that was able to stay. And so you finally said, okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to go back. And you just really learned a lot from that experience about how to build relationships, how to meet their instructional needs, and give them the grade level content while scaffolding the language levels and making the appropriate linguistic accommodations. And you wrote a lot about that experience in your book, Boosting Achievement. Is that the gist of it? Did I miss anything important there?
No, I want to lift up all teachers because I had been out of the classroom. You had it all correct, and thank
Okay.
you. We had been out of the classroom for a while. We were not expecting these students, the acronym that you mentioned, SLIFE, or students with limited or interrupted formal education. We're in Houston. We're close to a border. We're not strangers to newcomers. It was just that your demographics can change very quickly. A refugee resettlement organization that is wonderful made a deal with an apartment complex, and that school, because they had a discount on rent, saw tens and tens and tens of kids just in the first few weeks of school, refugee students that had had very limited formal education being enrolled. And so, yeah, we were being reactive because this happened right after the school year started.
Yeah, it does happen sometimes that they trickle in and you're able to prepare, fairly adequately, but it seems like more often than not, it's an influx and
Yeah.
you have to change then and there. And yeah, that's always a challenge. So anyway, today we're going to talk about the top tips for the first days of school
Yes.
for teachers with newcomer multilingual learners.
Yes, absolutely. Because, like I said, I want to lift up teachers. I had been out of the classroom and I was a specialist and I had a lot of training and certifications and second language acquisition. But in the reality, with real kids, and even and especially when it's bigger numbers, we can. I lost sight of some of the very foundational things. I
Hmm.
appreciate what you said that the kids, we learned a lot. The kids taught me a lot, so it didn't go great when I first took over, but in the second semester, people like yourself, people online, people helped me think through it. So I'd love to share some of the things that the second year I stayed in the classroom and I stayed with in secondary with students with limited education. And we just learned so much. And the next year, we actually saw the kids less. We went
Hmm.
to a block schedule where I would see newcomers every other day. And but we started differently. We started differently, and it made all the difference the second year and every year after that. I have some top tips if you are the EL or English language development teacher and you're pulling kids aside and you have a class like that. But today, and I have videos on that. I'll touch on those. But today, I think we were going to talk about if you are a classroom teacher and you
Yes.
have some students with
Hmm.
limited education, how might you start the school year in a way that would be meaningful for that child?
Yeah. So, but again, to preface, there's no easy fix.
No.
And especially newcomers. That's probably the most diverse group in terms of having divergent needs of students, because again, the language distance, the former academic experiences, it's just, you really have to spend time with them and gauge where they are and build that relationship. And there's no quick fix.
Right. And I know this is your space also, Andrew. I have
Hmm.
had the honor of watching you teach a diverse group of newcomers and really connect with all of them, even though their backgrounds are so very different. So I agree. I echo what you're saying. What you need to keep in mind is each child's background, even if every single one of them in front of you, say there's 4 kids and they're at the exact same language level for English language production and comprehension,
Hmm.
they are wildly different in what they have, and what
Right.
they bring and their funds of knowledge. So I agree with you. You start to learn more and more about that, as you said, if you build relationships with them.
Yeah. So I'm going to read some of these from the section of the new edition of your book. The
Ah,
first says, relax and think positively.
right, right. So that was something, and again, let's think about a classroom teacher or a biology teacher, or it can be so stressful. Exactly what you were saying. We became teachers because we want to help every child, and you might be at a loss for what am I going to do for this child. That's where I was. I had so much anxiety when I had so many of them. I couldn't even translate things because many of them didn't have literacy in their heritage language. I was just failing to realize you don't even have to translate that much. So
Hmm.
much of comprehension is body language and gestures and visuals and things like that. So if you can just remind yourself, if you can lower your own affective filter, which is we say you really need to lower the student's affective stress, affective filter. It's a Stephen Krashen's research. If we lower that, then they can catch so much more. They can attend to so much more if they're not stressed out. Well, the same is true for us. I was sitting there freaking out and failing to see what kids could do because you're just so nervous about it and focusing maybe on the 1 or 2 kids who seem to not understand anything,
Hmm.
when it would have been better to just let them work together and walk around and help facilitate some things. So thinking positively, I mean, I'm not talking about toxic positivity, everything's going to be great, everything's going to be great. I just mean you have to remind yourself that that child, just because they don't have English or literacy or formal education, does not mean that they don't have rich funds of knowledge. It doesn't mean they don't have advantages that you can leverage. You can, no matter what their background is. They have advantages. There are advantages to their background that
Hmm.
can be leveraged. So that reality of this is not a cognitive issue. This is a lack of opportunity issue is something that would go on my sticky note on my dashboard on my Starbucks line mantra. It's like they can do more than they can show you. They can understand more than they can show you. And we have 10 months with them. So just relax that this is a long game, make them feel comfortable, and realize not just, oh, everything's gonna be great. Realize that it's true. This is not a cognitive issue. Every single day that child should understand more English. So here's an example of positivity that you can hold on to. Maybe today you feel like they understand nothing. Maybe you think that. Okay, and maybe they don't. Maybe it's day one. But is that the same case after a month or 2 months or 4 months or 6 months? I mean, we have them, right, Andrew, for 10 months.
Hmm.
Every single day they understand a little bit more. So remind yourself of that it should get easier as you go through time. And our job right now is to make them comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, it should and it will.
Yeah,
Um, and I was just thinking too, when you say thinking positively, that was kind of a switch in the mindset about 15 years ago, for me anyway, when it was really presented like think about students additively, like what can they do? And we
right.
need to think that way about ourselves too. Like, what can we do? I mean, teachers who say, you know, I have no idea what to do with this kid. It's like, well, you have a lot of experience. You're a good teacher. Like, you could do something,
Right.
like I understand the way like nerves will do that to
That's
you and a
it.
new situation will do that to you. But like, okay, yeah, use your skill set. Like it might look a little different, but they're teachable kids. You can teach them.
Absolutely. And that's why I keep saying I want to lift up teachers because when I go in and model my job, I work for Sidelets Education, and you know, I've been in your district, Andrew, and we partner together and go in and model, and I just get hit in the face with, okay, this is not a cakewalk. This is
Hmm.
you have to do what you believe. You have to remember what you believe is that kids understand more than they may be able to say, and that they can do a lot, and that, you know, you have to lean into what, like you said, what you know as a teacher is like collaborative learning and making kids feel comfortable. But but when I was stressed out, that those things didn't occur to me. Those
Yeah.
things did not occur to me. I was focusing on what they could not do. I just was, I felt sorry for them, poor babies, you know, none of that was helping them. None of
Yeah.
that was helping them. But having somebody go, well, there's some simple things like them repeating one or two things a day
Yeah.
are going to make a difference. So yeah, I want to lift up teachers and echo what you're saying. You probably are you're probably doing things that are perfect for that child, and you may not be realizing that they're high on blooms that would be able to include them in grade level work.
Yes. All right. So the second one you have is face the student and slow your rate of speech.
Right. So, to the extent that it's practical, to the extent that it makes sense, just understand that if someone who is trying to acquire the language, they're watching your mouth. You may not even realize you're doing that when you're trying to understand someone and you're gaining the language. But so, facing someone who is a new language learner is very different from talking to them where you're not facing them. Just hearing words hanging in the air versus, you know, if you can see how the TH and the different ways that we're forming words, it makes a huge difference to be facing the person who you want them to understand what you're saying. So, slowing the rate of speech does not need to be a ridiculous slow down of how you speak. It's think about being able to hear the breaks in words. And
Hmm.
a lot of people will attest to this who've tried to learn another language. They say, I'm starting to get it, but when they talk fast, then I don't understand it. Well, that's because you can't really hear the breaks in the words. So,
Hmm.
what makes sense? Let's take math. Let's take sixth grade math or calculus, high school. What would make sense? I would offer you that going over your objectives, going over what we're going to do today. I'm trying to think of where would the entire class benefit from you slowing down a minute and being very explicit about something. And so let's take our exit ticket. Today we are going to learn to factor and determine the greatest common factor. You know, let's say that's what, and I want them all because I know it has a huge effect on how much achievement there is by the entire class. John Hattie's work will tell you clear goals, and the more that students understand what the goal is, the more students are going to achieve in your classroom. So that might be when I slow down and tap what our exit ticket is going to be using words like greatest common factor. Now, what your newcomer is getting out of that is high frequency words. Let's say I tap that sentence to solve for the greatest common factor, first I, then I, next I. Let's say I tapped it, I slowed down. And the kids are like, why is she slowing down? Because it's important. Everybody, you're going to speak
Hmm.
like mathematicians, and this is our goal today. Well, your newcomer, if someone tells them what to pay attention to, they're getting high frequency words in there. They're getting directionality. They're getting syntax. They're getting oracy. If we get, okay, I'm going to say it, then we're going to say it. So everybody in here, we're going to raise a dialogue all year long. They're just word margins. They're just so many things that this student will get out of that 16 seconds, but your entire class will get a boost in achievement. So we're not saying you have to slow down your lesson. We're saying there are opportunities to tap to teach and maybe slow down at certain points where the entire class would benefit. And please remember that you have 174 days, something like that, something close to
Yeah.
200 days. So don't think a little thing like that isn't effective over 10 months. It really, truly is.
You know, something I do all the time now that I really did not do with the same frequency before I got to have you come to my district so much, is just regularly with main ideas. One student's reading, a few like choral reading, whatever they're doing, but just stopping as needed when it's necessary with the main idea and saying like, okay, stop. Let's read that sentence again because this sentence is so important to this entire reading selection. Point to this word. Let's read it together.
And
Or
I was
again, a key
amazed. I
vocabulary word,
was
same thing.
amazed at the growth of your students. I mean, before I ever had an opportunity to come into your classroom, you were doing amazing things with your students. So I was just so impressed with their reading growth. So the things that you're doing with them like that, those very explicit things are super helpful. Focusing and not thinking, well, they can't read in English, so this things like
Hmm.
and stuff like that is not for them. That's the answer. The answer
Hmm.
to expose them to grade level content and standards while they're gaining language, while they're gaining literacy. So
Yes.
thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for helping me.
Well, we're
Uh,
both collaborating. I learned so much from you, Andrew.
all right. The next one says use visuals and gesture.
Oh yeah, that's a top tip. In fact, the students themselves, if you were to survey your newcomers at the end of this school year and ask them, what were the things that teachers did in classrooms when you were very new that helped the most? They'll tell you, just point to what you're teaching. Just point to
Hmm.
what you're teaching. So that whole tap to teach, I'm going to tap the poster when I'm talking about the solar system or mitosis or main idea and details. Have anchor charts that you create with your class
Hmm.
because you will have higher achievement of the entire class when they have anchored their learning in different places around the room. So as a teacher, I'm just going to remember to tap or gesture toward what I'm talking about. So imagine if you don't understand anything the teacher's saying, but in your mind, you're like, it looks like we're talking about the solar system again. That is miles different than I don't understand anything. They're just wonk, 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 and I don't understand anything. So tapping those words, like I said, or tapping your visuals with the vocabulary next to it while you're teaching. Do we even realize how many times we say anaphase, mitosis? You say it over and over again. So getting into the habit of tapping what you're teaching, visuals, and gestures. Just pantomime whatever you can. And we're going to be writing today. We're going to be sitting over here. We're going to be opening this book. You don't have to translate, get a pen if you hold up a pen. And that, in addition to every day they understand a little bit more, is
Hmm.
huge. But it is their ask. They say if our teachers will just use more visuals and gestures, it has a completely different experience for them. And it
What are
does
your
not
hands?
take extra class time, right?
No,
Yeah.
just have to be used to doing it.
Yeah, it's a habit.
Yeah. All right. The next one, pair students with kind classmates.
Yeah, I really freaked out that year that we had so many different refugees from different countries because we didn't have a whole class full of Spanish speakers like I was used to, where you could pair kids with native language peers. That just did not work out for everyone. And we found that you don't need that as much as you need a kind peer. Because, first of all, a student does not need to be translating and become the translator. They're going to miss
Hmm.
instruction. So, if the teacher's using what we call comprehensible input, like we're saying, gestures, visuals, slowing down, all those things, and the student's paying attention in a low stress way, you can comprehend so much more. So if we can train the student who is the kind peer, make sure they're on the right page. Make sure you point to the
Hmm.
teacher. Make sure they know where we are and what we're doing. The teacher will take care of, are they going to have to read less of this? Are they going to get an audio version? There's so many different things that we can accommodate. So the friend is there just to make sure that they're with us.
Yeah. Because you're still the teacher. The friend is not the teacher.
We have so many, and I know listeners will agree. And you're right, Andrew. The friend is not the teacher. The friend is just making sure you're not waiting for the teacher
Hmm.
to come by just to let them know what page we're on, watch the teacher. There's just gestures. They just need to be a kind peer. And
Hmm.
I know when people are thinking, but oh my gosh, if you're hearing this in August and in September, the beginning of the school year, you might be thinking, there's no way that's going to be enough. But we're recording this at the end of a school year where I know people had newcomers since the beginning of the school year and they'd be like, yeah, that's about what he needs. That's about what she needs would be somebody just, he's already, that's what I'm saying. They don't stay at whatever, it's not a static thing. Every day it gets easier and easier. So we don't need to be like, oh, that's not going to be enough. Whatever we're doing, we are realizing that every single day it's becoming more meaningful and the things that we're doing help the entire class.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we have two more. Next one is offer a tour of the classroom.
Yeah, so that kind of goes in line with a kind peer. You could have an ambassador for your classroom. You could give the
Hmm.
kiddo a tour of the classroom. So this kind of goes back to routines. Please do everything the same way. Don't change where you put homework from week to week. Do everything the same way. When they come in, where they put things, how you start the class, those kinds of things, because you would want those routines. Those would make you feel so safe in that classroom. And so to offer just a tour of here's a pencil sharpener, here's where we put homework, here's where your books go, here's, just somebody that can, here's our social contract, and we're going to let you take some time and see if you can agree to this. You know, just letting a tour of the classroom can be real powerful for a welcoming thing. And sometimes newcomers, if you have kids come in the middle of the school year, the kiddos you had come at the beginning of the school year are ready to be those ambassadors. So
Hmm.
it does double duty there where it offers a leadership opportunity for some students that maybe have just a few months ahead of
And
this
that,
child.
I think too, that speaks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and just making sure that their basic needs are met. If, this could be their first time in a US school. You don't know what their former school was like. You don't know what the procedures were like or the culture was like, or, the teacher-student relationship. So, priority number one, if not one of several with newcomers, is just making sure they understand how this place works, and
Right.
that when they have questions or there's something they need help with, that they know what to do or where to go or who they can talk to.
Exactly. That's why I agree 100%. This has to do with our affective needs and why do we don't need any extra stress on this student.
Mm.
So helping them feel part of the class and know who they can ask, even if it's the kind peer, and then that this is all working together. Everything we've said so far, I couldn't agree with you more.
Great. Okay. And so the final one is smile and practice patience.
Right. Everything we've said right now is pretty much for day one. That could happen day one and is practical. But we started with our mindset, relax and remember some things. Relax and remember from an asset lens the positive things that you have at your disposal and that child has for learning. And then this one, it just goes hand in hand with the research that we know about multilingual learners, that the way they acculturate into their new environment, if it's a positive acculturation experience, if they don't feel negative about themselves or where they come from and things like that, um, it it makes all the difference. The research that I did in my dissertation about SLIFE coming into high school, students with limited education coming into high school, I mean, the ones that don't drop out, it's because teachers were patient and kind. Patient and kind. There were other factors about community and school systems and family, but when it came to teachers and what teachers did, the biggest thing was be kind, be patient, and hold them in high esteem. They need to get the vibe that they are valued there.
Hmm.
So the smiling goes along with practicing patient. I mean, with the kindness. A smile is, I heard Elise Diaz say, my colleague Elise Diaz say, a smile is a multilingual thing,
Hmm.
right? There's
We all smile in the same language.
exactly. And in October, I needed someone to remind me to smile. October,
Hmm.
November, December, the rest of the year, I needed reminders. And so that is a habit that we need to get into, is that a lot of times these students, that might be the tone. So instead of getting frustrated, please try to be patient and recognize if you what can be valued.
Hmm.
How can we help this student feel valuable? And if nothing else, value the bravery, honor the bravery it must take to come into a new environment while you're just learning the language and maybe even how to do formal education. Because again, remind yourself this is not a disability. In fact, the older they are and the less education they have, Anna and I write about this, and we're looking at research from students who did not have technology in their formative years. So, yes, we don't want anybody to go through really, really hard things, but if they have, it could be that they didn't have access to technology. And so there are some things about how the brain develops. There are some advantages to that. So there are a lot of things we need to keep in mind. Everybody has gifts. Everybody brings gifts.
And they need to know that you believe in them.
Right.
And
Right.
it's okay to say to yourself, I don't know how we're going to get there, but we'll get there.
But I know you are smarter than you realize, and I can do more than I realize. And that's the whole thing. You can
Hmm.
believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to ask you one more thing, though, just about recently, and I do have both editions. So when the first edition of Boosting Achievement came out, I mean, that was like the first time I'd ever really experienced those narratives around newcomers. And I'd had those students, and it was just hearing there was that acronym SLIFE, sometimes it's SIFE, but students with limited or interrupted formal education. Like it's like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. Like there's a name for it. You know, I could put a
Right.
name to it because it's like, I'd spent time. And again, this was before back in the day, before we had all these podcasts and chat rooms, or I mean, they were more primitive then, but there just wasn't a conversation around that. So you were able to put words to a lot of things that I had experienced, and obviously, that helps immensely um, in servicing these students and addressing their needs. But that said, uh, the second edition is not just a nice little, with some addendums. It's a much thicker book. You got a lot more in there. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Andrew, because it's folks like you, MABE, your district there in Michigan, that we've spotlighted a lot of districts like that use the first edition successfully. And so there's that. There are educator spotlights, district spotlights at the federal level, at the state level, what people did with that first edition and how they were successful serving these students. So that's something that we are very proud of, is that people did a lot of write-ups of how they were supporting these students in a practical way. We also have an expanded section on literacy for older emergent bilingual students. So older emergent readers, and how do you get literacy off the ground? How do you help students start to be able to decode the text that they're of the language that they're starting to own, and then fitting that into your literacy program, because things have changed quite a bit. We've learned a lot about how kids learn to read, and it needs to make sense. So we have an expanded section on that, rapid literacy. There are, there's a suggested scope and sequence, because I kept hearing from teachers that are like, I have a newcomer group or a class and I don't have a curriculum. Okay, we have the whole year with suggestions for activities and then daily things that you would do to support their language and literacy if you are the new arrival teacher or the ESL teacher. And then we have parts of the book for content teachers, like the stuff we just went over for the general ed classroom, and parts if you're the ESL teacher. Lots of QR codes, lots of student videos to reflect on and to use with your class. So there's a lot more, but I just appreciate everybody that helped us. It is twice the size of the first one. And so we're just grateful. We're grateful to everyone that has taught us so much, and we're happy to be sharing it.
Great. And if I'm not mistaken, you can order it at the Sidelets website.
Yes, sightlesseducation.com or on Amazon.
On Amazon. Great.
Yep.
And
Edition.
you will be coming back to Michigan for the Newcomer Summit at the end of July. So
That's
we
right.
look forward to
July
seeing you
31.
there. You'll be the end note. So get this whole time where you can just talk to everybody all at once. And
Can't
also
wait.
your colleagues, Elise White Diaz and Dr. Murray Heath will be there
That's
too. So
right.
that's super exciting.
We're all excited for Lord Gardner's opening keynote. And then, yes, we're very excited to be there. Michigan, it's just a special place in our hearts. And of course, MABE, we can't wait to partner with you again. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for everything you do.
Bye.